Well, many people hope the arrival of President Joe Biden would mark a change of tone in the political and societal conversation. But has that been the case exactly? Joseph Camilleri from La Trobe University joins us now to delve a little bit deeper. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about the state of American politics. I mean, we could speak all day about it, of course, but what is your take in terms of the polarisation that we are seeing at the moment and whether anything has improved or otherwise since Biden took over from Trump?
Well, it's hard to say that there's been much of an improvement. In fact, in some ways, it's going backwards. We have two things happening right now involving the Senate and the House of Representatives. In the Senate, there's this national push to get something of substance going on the question of gun control. This has been a perennial issue for US politics, with not much changing over the years, and perhaps one should say over the decades. Despite one mass shooting after another. Now, it does not look as if there will be substantial progress. And I think the Democrats have had no option but to accept the fact that the Republicans, who have been in majority, will only settle for some very minor cosmetic changes, and that's all that they'll get. And of course, to make things worse, there's every chance that the Republicans will do better at the coming midterm elections in November, in which case the fury and the anger that we're seeing fairly widespread across the US on the issue of gun control will, if anything, get worse. So that's one thing. And then on the other hand, we have the question of Capitol Hill, and now the congressional investigation, making it to prime television time viewing and rehearsing these extraordinary events which so deeply divided the United States. And again, it is very difficult to see that the substantial body of the electorate which supported Trump at the last election will suddenly depart from the scene. So no, I think the polarization is there, and if anything, it's getting worse because of a rapidly deteriorating economic situation.
We'll get to that in a moment. I just want to touch on the gun control debate. What do you see is the major, the most significant point in terms of nothing being able to change? Is it politically motivated from the Republicans? Is it that they want to hold power? We know the gun associations in America are very strong. They speak about their constitution and nothing should change in terms of being able to bear arms. What is the point that's making it so difficult for anything to change here?
Well, I think it is powerful lobbies, that's one thing, the gun lobby in particular, but it's a mindset. It's a mindset that probably impacts very strongly on some 40% of the American population, give or take, could be more, could be a little less. But around that, 40%, it's a huge segment of the American population. And it's a very, very important part of the current Republican base. So they're not going to let that go in order to look understanding, sympathetic, or compassionate when votes are going to be scarce for the Republicans and for the Democrats. Every vote counts. So that's the logic. And of course, they have Trump in the background, who is ready to pounce the moment there is any substantial inroad into current gun rules or laws. And that's the problem. You're between a rock and a hard place. And unfortunately, that's where the United States is at the moment.
And Professor, just finally, you mentioned the state of the economy. I mean, the global economy is under stress, but particularly in America. What do you make of the rising inflation and higher interest rates that are putting some pressure on families and individuals at the moment?
Well, you mentioned inflation, Adrian. Well, it stands at 8.5% May of this year compared to May last year. And oil prices have gone up by 107%. And all this, of course, while the US is still in the throes of a brutal pandemic. We mustn't forget that. A pandemic which has killed more than 1 million. And in the past month alone, the month of May, 3 million new cases and another 10,000 deaths. All that has significant economic impact. So what we're seeing now is the Federal Reserve, which for years has been into quantitative easing, as it's called, or money printing, as some others prefer to call it, is now starting on the opposite trend, quantitative tightening, which is expected to go up to as much as $100 billion per month. And thirdly, sharp and rising inequalities. That's what makes the situation explosive. Even during the COVID period, when the US government administration distributed up to $6 trillion, much of that went to corporate America, much less to ordinary Americans, and much less to vulnerable Americans. So there are tensions in the community and could easily bubble over at some point in relation to some other, in connection with some other political issue. But it's worth noting that the US has now what's called a debt economy. The national debt, I mean, no one of our viewers can even begin to understand the figure I'm going to mention. The national US debt stands at an incredible $30 trillion, which now is 124% of US GDP. So with higher interest rates, higher inflation rates, and the Federal Bank trying to keep things under control, a number of commentators are saying we may be in for a period of rather serious stagflation. So not a very happy state of affairs, I'm afraid to say, either on the political or the economic front.
No, certainly some challenging times ahead in the short term, at least. Let's hope for a bit of a change in the medium term. Professor, thank you. Enjoy your afternoon.
And you too. Thank you.